Welcome back. In our last session, we began to look at this encounter that Zechariah has in the sanctuary, and we see that an angel has appeared. And in our last session, we began to look at, far from being sort of imaginary or make-believe, the Bible actually presents angels as being very much real. And an encounter with an angel is a big deal. An encounter with an angel is something quite special. And we saw how the Bible presents angels throughout the Bible. So this encounter that Zechariah has is a big deal. An angel appearing is a big deal because when an angel appears, there's a purpose to it. There's a reason the angel appears. And it's quite a significant event, which is probably why when we read the account, it says Zechariah was shaken and overwhelmed with fear when he saw him. When we have an encounter with something of God, there is a physical aspect to it. I remember when I was filled with the Holy Spirit, there was a very physical encounter with God. And there's been a number of occasions through my life where I've had encounters with God and they've been a physical experience. And the effects that Zechariah feels when he encounters this angel is that he's overcome with fear. And the angel seeks to sort of put him at ease. But the effects of an encounter with God definitely has a physical experience. There are three things that we can see in this encounter that Zechariah has that maybe challenge us a little bit about what it means for us to come into the presence of God and experience something of encountering God. The first thing is that this encounter was unexpected. The things of God can often happen when we least expect it. You know, for Zechariah, he was fixed on going into this pinnacle of his career, this biggest moment of his life. It was already something massive. I suspect, though, that the last thing he expected was to have an actual encounter with something of God. And the angel is bringing a message from God. There is this unexpected encounter. And I wonder for you and me, how do we feel? Are we open to the idea that God could break in at any moment into our everyday in an unexpected way? The second thing we see about this encounter is that it was unusual. Remember that there's been something like 400 years of silence. The Malachi prophecy was sort of 430 years earlier when they returned from exile. And they've been going about this temple worship and this temple practice for over 400 years. They'd trained for going in to this sort of once-in-a-lifetime experience. And in all of that, when God breaks in, when he sends his angel, there's a sense that the normal routine of things is broken and is shaken up. And if we're honest, we probably don't like our everyday things being shaken up. We like the security of routine. And yet when God breaks through, not only is it unexpected, it can often be unusual. With the unusual, though, comes a third thing, which is that it's uncomfortable. The encounter that Zechariah has is unexpected, it's unusual, but it's also uncomfortable. And there's a physical reaction to this, where he becomes overcome with fear. If you've ever seen anybody overcome with fear, it can have a whole load of symptoms, ranging from being physically sick to fainting. And people can shake sometimes when they experience that. I guess it challenges us to remember our own mortality, our own nature, and sometimes when the presence of God comes and we have an encounter with God, there is something incredibly powerful about it, where there's a holiness, and that holiness can make us very aware of our own sinfulness. I remember hearing a story once about the revival in Pensacola, and when somebody stopped one of the ushers in the aisle and said, "What's it like to have the presence of God?" And they said, "It's so incredible, we're afraid to sin." I wonder how we react to the idea of the presence of God and that presence of God breaking in. these are good questions for us to ask, because we have a very rational mind, certainly in the UK and certainly in the West. We don't like to imagine or deal with things that somehow break out of the norm. And that's maybe one of the dangers of church today. We're actually quite happy doing church in a way where, if we're not careful, we actually create God in our own image. We're happy for God to do things as long as they fit within the routine of our service and within the 11 to 12 o'clock service. But actually, let us ask some questions. Do we dismiss the unusual with our rational minds? This break-in that Zechariah has, where the angel breaks in, it is unusual, and it challenges his expectations. No wonder. Do we dismiss the unusual if something happens in our service that is slightly out of the norm? Are we people who want to dismiss that because it doesn't fit into our rational thinking? Do we reject the unexpected? Actually, you know what? It's inconvenient. Well, the service might go on for a bit longer. That's inconvenient. I've got the Sunday roast on. We want an encounter with God as long as it fits into our timetable. Or do we avoid the uncomfortable? If we're totally honest, do we avoid the uncomfortable? Do we sit there and say, okay, we want to make sure that our times together are seeker-friendly and we get a balance where we avoid things that sort of make people feel uncomfortable? There is a balance to have. We've got to avoid being stupid. And I think sometimes there's a lot of fleshly things that go on in our services that, to be honest, are not God, but are actually people, and people doing silly things. But actually, we live in a world that are hungry for a genuine encounter with the supernatural. And in our efforts to make everything comfortable, do we actually make it too comfortable that actually we want to avoid the uncomfortable sense of God breaking in?